are talking Mummy Resurrection, and this one is written and directed by Steve Lawson. Now this is produced by Creative Studios, who are a low-budget British independent production company headed up by Steve Lawson, and they produce what I would describe as highbrow B-movies. They've done a number of movies that we've actually reviewed here on the channel that are all kind of based on either historical figures or kind of public domain, well-known kind of characters, and they tend to be quite dialogue-driven, sort of talky movies that are broadly kind of associated with the subject, be it, you know, Dracula or a real life like, you know, Jack the Ripper or something along the lines of that. So here we have a movie, Mummy Resurrection. The difference with this one is it isn't actually based on a particular kind of public domain story or character. It is broadly based on, obviously, the mummy mythos, and we've seen a variety of mummy movies in the past. Now this kind of plays a little bit like the kind of the old-fashioned kind of style mummy movies that we used to get in kind of Universal Pictures and some of the kind of the Hammer movies, things like that. So it kind of plays like one of those. It's a slower moving, kind of more cerebral B-movie ultimately. Now, what is the story? Well, it focuses on two cousins, one of which is very scientifically minded, you know, comes from a kind of a wealthy background. The other one is a little bit of a low life, kind of has gambling debts, and they are called to their uncle's kind of deathbed ultimately, where he is a kind of a explorer that has, you know, got a variety of different kind of things, and he has this sarcophagus of this mummy, this kind of princess, that is a gold encrusted sarcophagus that has a curse with it. And the kind of this old gentleman explorer basically says, like, this to me, it's got a curse on it. It needs to be like walled up and forgotten about ultimately. Now, of course, our two cousins have differing views about what to do. Of course, the more scientific one kind of wants to pretty much respect his kind of uncle's wishes and wall it up, but also comes at it from a scientific point of view, while of course the guy who's got these kind of gambling debts wants to obviously see what he can get out of it, and of course you'll have to deal with the consequences. Now what will happen? You'll have to watch the movie and find out. So let's discuss what I think works with Mummy Resurrection. So as I've mentioned, I do feel this could be classed as a B movie because it definitely has that kind of low budget production. But if I look back and you look at the rest of the kind of Steve Lawson directed movies, they kind of feel like they have had a little bit of time on it. They don't feel like they're kind of rushed, unlike a lot of kind of like what you could be described as low budget kind of horror films. It does feel like these productions have spent a little bit more time, care and effort on them, thinking a lot more about the story. One of the elements that I really did enjoy with this story is our differing approach on regards to how to deal with this kind of mummy legend. Now, obviously, the people kind of hear this kind of, you know, the curse, and everyone's kind of afraid of it. But our cousin, who is the more scientific, wants to kind of understand what it means on a scientific basis. And I won't kind of go into, you know, what he discovers, but he finds scientific reasons about why these kind of like apparent kind of curses may actually kind of be real. And all our other guy wants to talk about is how he can make money off it. So we have a couple of different kind of point of views about what it all means and kind of like the actual kind of reasons for it. One person wants to kind of discover the scientific method, one person simply doesn't care, and then we have these kind of all the peripheral characters are just afraid of the kind of the superstition. So I actually found this an interesting concept. We have all of these kind of different kind of point of views about a kind of, you know, a standard kind of mummy curse, so to speak, and coming at it all from different kind of ways. So I thought it was quite clever, especially some of the ways that I think our kind of scientist character maybe explains some of the kind of some of the things that might happen in regards to this particular cause. That was kind of quite fun. So it takes place at the beginning of the kind of the 20th century. So it's some of a period piece, as are pretty much all of these kind of like creative studio productions. So it has this kind of like old-fashioned kind of British kind of feel to it, where we have these characters kind of talking in the time, so to speak, in regards to kind of like monetary sums, certain kind of like attitudes that might be kind of prevalent at that era. So those of you who are interested in kind of like the Downton Abbeys, the kind of the Crown, those sort of things, but you kind of like a little bit more of a darker horror twist on a low budget, may well kind of be interested in this movie as well. I think the kind of like, for example, the location shooting, the kind of the set design, again, some of the time the budget shows through, especially when we're, you know, in the scenes in quote unquote Egypt. But nonetheless, I do think some of the kind of the set design of this kind of old, kind of fashioned, kind of English style kind of manner and stuff is quite good. The acting, I think, again, it's not the best acting ever, but I've got to say, I think it's okay for this kind of level of movie. I think everyone here does a pretty good job. We've seen a lot of these actors, come up in other creative studios movies, so they're kind of, I think they're pretty good. Some of the kind of dialogue feels a little bit stilted, but for the most part, I would say it's okay for this kind of level of movie. And when we do get our mummy scenes, I think there is some, they've again battled with the kind of the budget here, but nonetheless, I do think there are a couple of effective sequences where it looks quite good. Let's transition to what I think doesn't work. Staying with the actual mummy themselves, we really only don't see that much of it, to be honest with you. It's a female mummy, and she looks more like She-Hulk than a mummy, I will say. So, and mummy is not in it as much as you would think. In actual fact, and again, this is very true of a lot of these kind of creative studio movies, the actual kind of concept of the mummy is only a backdrop for other kind of character work. And this is true of a lot of these kind of movies. It only seems to be tangentially related to whatever the public domain figure is, or whatever the kind of the historical person might be. It's because it's not really about them. It's more about other characters that are in the kind of the orbit of said kind of like famous thing, so to speak. Now this is a slower movie. It's very dialogue driven, as is a lot of these kind of productions. So those of you who aren't interested in kind of like just slow moving character pieces, I think maybe could have put off by certainly the kind of the very talky nature of this movie, and I think put off by the fact that really there's not a lot of actual kind of horror involved here. It is really just a battle of wills, primarily between these kind of two cousins, and that makes the crux of the movie. The budget, as I've mentioned, does kind of show through. It does look a little bit kind of like fake looking at times. Again, I'm somewhat forgiving of such things because I understand the budgetary restraints of a kind of a B movie. And I think I have to say as well, I kind of enjoyed how to kind of explore the kind of the scientific areas of what particular makes like this mummy's curse. But actually, as the film goes on, although I quite liked it initially, I gotta say where it ended up I thought was a little silly. It kind of just went a little bit too cheesy and too silly, and I think where the ending of the movie itself was extraordinarily rushed, and it just felt kind of like just slap something on screen. Whilst the rest of the movie seems much more considered and thought-provoking to a certain degree, when we get to the end, it just kind of like just happens. So the end of it, I feel like, was possibly maybe reshot, or it didn't really work. They had to kind of like rejig things, but it just feels like particularly kind of rushed. So where to score this movie? It pretty much falls in line, I think, with a lot of these kind of like these creative studio movies. I have to say, I was quite intrigued with the characters of this movie, and I quite liked some of the kind of the work here done in exploring kind of different point of views about how to kind of deal with the mummy and what it kind of means to them. So I actually did like that. And although this movie is definitely not really a horror at all, it only has the kind of the trappings of a horror. Don't be expecting a lot of mummy action because there's precious little in this. And it really is only not really a horror film at all. It's more of a drama than anything else. It just kind of presents as a kind of horror because it's about a mummy, but it's not really. So I don't think it's certainly a bad film, but I don't think it's particularly interesting for a lot of people. Those who expect a kind of a mummy going on a killing spree will be sorely disappointed. But I do feel there is some kind of like crossover with the Mummy films of old, where it is a slower moving film. But even those, I feel, had a little bit more horror than maybe this one does. So we're going to go a 5 out of 10. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.